has been a subject that's been percolating with me for a while. That's the concept of, it's a concept. It's a situation, something called leadership. And usually when we think about leadership, we're thinking about people who are in high positions, who hold authority or power, have been elected or somehow, or they're sitting at the dais in some situation like that. But I was thinking in a more, just like there's a mission in Pirkei Avos, for example, that says, Ezehu Gibor, who's the strong person? Hakovish es Yitzro. The person has control over his own situation. We usually think, he asked in his, Ben Zoma asks in a way, that you're waiting to say, you stopped the man in the street interview, Ezehu Gibor, who's the strong person? No, he's strong, he's powerful. This person has, power and control. And it could be some quiet person walking down the street that's not recognized by anybody else, and he's the real powerful person. And usually the people who are seeking power and fame and notoriety are probably weaker. They have, actually, many of them have attention deficit disorder. And that means they're missing, if they don't get attention, they're the most lonely, lost creatures on the whole planet. They can only define themselves by what people around them are, building them up and saying about them. They really have very little, if any, self-esteem at all. So they're not really strong people. So there's another mission in Pirkei Avos that says, I confronted a number of years ago, and the Mishnah, when I was teaching in Hebrew day school, and the Mishnah says, "Have a makdim shalom l'chol odom," which I saw commentaries that say that one of the insights is, be the first one to say shalom, be the first one to say hello to people. And I taught this over to the students. They even give an example that there was a great person, the Talmud speaks about, his name is Rabbi Yochanan Hasandler, and he was the first one, he was to say shalom afil l'nachri b'shuk, even to a Gentile that's in the street. Oh, good morning, Mr. Jones. Good morning, Mr. Smith. Good morning. It's Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky when he passed away. So there's a nunnery right next to where he lived on Saddle River Road. I don't know if nobody knows the geography over there, but there's a Saint Vitus or whatever, Big Ziti, whatever it was, Ziti something. And they were asking afterwards, they were saying, where is that old man that used to smile at us every morning? Whatever happened to him? They want to know what happened to him, because he used to smile at them. That was his, he was a gracious person like that. So that's how I taught it over to the students, such a notion like that. But what happened was, it set off a contagion the next day of fights. Having makdim shalom l'chol odom. Next thing you know, next day everybody was slugging it out, because when one person said shalom, one kid got left out. Howard didn't say shalom, so he went over to another kid said shalom. Everybody was first. So here you have sort of a moral imperative to be the first one to say hello, but not everybody can fulfill it. Because if I do it, you don't. And if you do it, I don't. So if I say shalom aleichem, I got it before you. Then kids were being locked out. They weren't being the first one to say shalom. So nobody could, it's only a certain percentage could fulfill it, and another percentage were being locked out, and it set off fights. Got just the opposite results. That's how kids are. They get competitive. And I realized through research that can't be the only meaning of what it means having makdim shalom l'chol odom. And I came to appreciate later on when I saw another mission in Pirkei Avos that says, it's actually early on in the first parak, that says, Yehi beischa beis vad l'chachamim, let your house be the house that's a meeting place for the sages. Okay, sounds like a nice thing also. Your house should be the place where the parlor meeting, where the shir takes place. Very nice. But it's one of those limited things, because if it's at your house, it's not at your house, and it's at your house, it's not at this one's house. How can everybody's house be the house where the meeting place for the sages take place? The Rosh Yeshiva from Lakewood are descended upon Muncie. They didn't stay in everybody's house. They took in this one's house, but they didn't go to that one's house. Well, so there was a selection that went on. And they're not going to get to everybody's house. It just can't be that your house is the house, but that everybody has the house. That's the meeting place for the sages. It just can't be a universal mandate. But I once heard a parish like this that says the following thing. It says, the Mishnah says, Yehi beischa, beis vad l'chachamim. Yehi is a lashon of havaya, a lashon of being. Let your house be the type of house that if the sages were coming to your house, they would feel comfortable coming to your house. Nothing has to be the house where that's why we put pictures on the walls in all Jewish homes, right? You see all over the place, right? V'hayu enecha rosa es morecha. Let your eyes see the face of your teachers. I remember in yeshiva, we used to have this picture of the Chafetz Chaim on the wall. I don't know, somebody painted it. It had the eyes, the pupils were in such a way that no matter where you were in the room, it looked like he was looking at you, and nobody could speak Lashon Hara in front of the Chafetz Chaim, in that dining room, we would look up, it was ominous. It was something to behold. So the premise is, it's like if you knew the Gadol Hador was coming to your house, how much of an imposition would it be? Like, I better turn this picture around. I better take these magazines and shove them into the closet. I better take this milk and these things, these products that are and put them in a box or in a bin in the back, or throw them out. Hope the trash guy takes them. There's certain things you want to get rid of. Let me turn off this thing. Let me turn off that machine. Let me put this in the closet. How uncomfortable would it be? There's a Batchan in Muncie. He used to say stuff like, he says he's picking up his mother-in-law up at the airport, and on his way he's driving her to the house. He says, "How long are you staying, Ma?" She says, "As long as you want." He says, "You're not even coming in for a cup of coffee?" Yeah. Can you imagine you have the Gadol Hador, he's coming to your house, and you ask him, "How long are you staying?" He's thinking he's going to stay maybe a couple of hours. He says, "I'm staying for a week." A week? Oh my gosh. No, I'm staying for a lifetime. I'm moving in. Right? That's when the Klal Yisrael said Nasev Nishma, that we're going to accept the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So it wasn't just a cartoon that they offered to the Gentiles, and they offered to Esav and Yishmael, and they said Maksiba, what's written in it, don't steal, don't kill. They couldn't live comfortably with it. You can't steal, you can't. After a while, it's going to be uncomfortable for them. Klal Yisrael said Nasev Nishma, it suits us. It means that it's a state of being. Let your house be that type of house that if the sages were moving to your house, it wouldn't over-challenge and overtax your comfort level. Fine. And the same thing we go back to, Hevei Makdim Shalom L'chol Adam is also a Lashon Havaya. Hevei Makdim Shalom L'chol Adam. Be the person who when you go out and you meet the world, when you go out and greet a challenging world, you're in a state of, I am going to create a state of peace no matter what anybody says to me, no matter what happens. I'm going to take a leadership role in my interaction with people, rather than being a reactor, rather than being a victim of everybody's attitude. A bunch of, I'm running into grumbling faces. I got a bunch of grumbling students over here. I have customers. I have parents who are barking at me. But I'm going to be having makdim shalom l'chol odom. I have to be in a positive state. It's a local type. It's the most local form of leadership. I want to share a couple of different qualities of leadership, amazing things, and we can go back to different examples of Jewish history. Is just replete. It's filled with some of the most amazing personalities of all time. And here are just a few attitudes that are just critical, I think, for a person in order to be a leader. We go back to Yosef Atzadik. I remember a number of years ago when for the first time, I went to visit Jewish prisoners. And I ended up going from that visit, I ended up continuing on a string almost for 8 years continuously every Sunday night. For some reason, they liked me over there. I don't know. And I liked going there also. There was something, some vitamins in those visits for me. But I remember that the first time I knew I was going to go speak to Jewish prisoners, I became a little bit, trying to think and prepare, what can you say to people who are sitting in prison? So, just can't come and dump lecture number 7 on them, or lecture number 700. You have to stalk Yodei Tzadik Nefesh Behemto. You got to know a little bit of what the people are looking for and think about. So I've started thinking to myself, this is how my reasoning goes. I wonder what they would want more than anything else. And the answer is, get me out of here. It's not true about everybody there, by the way. I want you to know that. Yeah. Jewish prisoners have been a chorin. Naturally. Others, they're very happy with the hots and the cots. 3 hot meals, and some beds. If they get thrown out of there, like, what am I supposed to do now? And now life becomes too complicated. Someone once said that they saw a study someplace that says that 1% of the population thinks, 4% of the population think they think, and the other 95% would rather die than think, right? So, show me where I'm supposed to move the mop, and then show me where the basketball court is and the weightlifting, and they even have wives and all kinds of different, things going on over there, and children, and everybody's being paid for. They got the happiest marriages. These guys got the biggest smiles on their face like you ever saw. But a Jew can't take to being there. I promise you. And they're panicked to get out. They want to get out so badly. They feel cut off from the world. So I came in, and I said, I guess some of you guys would probably want to get out. Yeah, they'd want to get out of here. They want to get back to the world. They want to be choosers, right? And so I said, I started scanning in my mind also, like, who's the first person who ever got out of prison, who got into prison, got out of prison? Let me see if I can find something like that in Chumash, or maybe in Tanakh or something. Ooh, genius, Shabbat genius, yeah? I see you already percolating on the lips over there. Who? Yosef HaTzadik. So Yosef got into prison, and Yosef got out of prison. So I decided to do a little research and try to find out, how did Yosef get out of prison? Oh, here's Yosef. That's how he got out of prison. I came up with a couple of insights. And I said, something, this is interesting. I never noticed that before. And I came to these fellows, and I said, I guess some people would want to get out. How did Yosef get out of prison? How did Yosef get out of prison? So right away, a couple of guys, know the storyline. They say, hey, he interpreted the dream of the butler and the baker got hung, and the butler ended up going back to King Pharaoh, and Pharaoh needed a dream interpreted. Even Yosef told him to remember him. He didn't remember him for a couple of years. Oh, very good. Oh, yeah. And then eventually, when Pharaoh needed that dream, so Yosef interpreted the dream, and he got the job, and he got pulled out of prison. And I said, no, that's not what happened. I said, Rabbi, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And I said, well, that's not what happened. What do you say? Another guy tells me a similar story. I said, that's not what happened. He said, what are you talking about? I said, the problem with you guys? I said, you all saw the movie. You didn't read the book. I read the book. And here, I have it in front of me. Let's take a look and see what it says. Which state here? It says that Yosef was in prison. Now, if we have to say something about Yosef at this point in his life, if there was ever a person in history, if there was ever a person on this planet who had an excuse to be clinically depressed, right? I think we could give a license to Yosef to want to stay under the covers, and just because he was the biggest reject, of all time, right? Let's just think about it. His family, his entire family, sent him away. They sold him into slavery. His brothers, tzaddikim, great people. We'll leave that discussion. How did that happen? There was a perfect storm, their perception of him, whatever it is. But he got sold away. He got sent away from his home. Ad kedei kach. If anybody had a reason to feel rejected also, it was Yosef. Because I remember once heard from a friend of mine who was at a Shalashudus with the boss and the Rebbe, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. And he said over that, people ask the question, how come Yosef never got in touch with Yaakov all those years? Because the psukim right before the time that Yaakov was sent to go, by his father to go, it says that Yosef said over the second dream, and his father was there, the sun, the moon, the stars, and his brothers judged him to be a Navi Sheker, that he's a false prophet. When it comes to Nevuah, it's not like, horseshoes and hand grenades. Almost is not good enough. If I tell you I've got a lottery number, that's the $300 million lottery winner, and I give you, and let's say it's 10 numbers that you have to string together, and I string together 9 of them, but 10 doesn't work out, you walk away with nothing in your pocket. So you say, well, pretty good, 9, huh? 9 didn't do me anything. So what I got? You got 9 numbers. You're pretty good, but you ain't no Navi, And he says the sun, the moon, and the star are all swirling around me, and I'm the centerpiece over here. And they said, you're an egomaniac. That's what you are. Because his father told him also in front of the brothers, what are you talking about? What do you mean the sun, the moon, and the star? What's the moon and the star? Who's the moon? I'm the star. I'm the star. I'm the sun. Mommy's the moon. Who's mommy? Mama Rachel. Mama Rachel's dead. She died in childbirth. What are you talking about? It says Aviv Shomer said to her. It says quietly his father kept it. Yosef, then his father sends him and says, go and go see what's doing with your brothers, and that's when they put the hit on him. He suspected. I have a hard time saying it. He, to my friend, said that the Rebbe had said, he had suggested, although I never saw it in any other chazal, that he was suspicious that even his father had sent them away. Right? That could be a reason why. Okay, so if anybody ever had reason to be rejected, Yosef had reason to be rejected. How about that? And yet we find that when he was in prison, and now two new guys come into the prison. Oh, news from the outside, you know? I mean, that's what these guys, I know they also felt cut off. Oh, someone's coming from the outside. What's with politics? What's happening in the street? What's with business? Let's hear some news from the outside. He says, so when he heard that two new guys came in, the pasuk says, Vayavo alehem Yosef b'boker. Yosef came to them in the morning. He got up in the morning and he went to go see them. But maybe he's interested only to hear, what's going on out there, just like even these guys are willing to hear some rabbi or something who's coming to the outside. Anybody will come and visit them, give them a little attention, they're willing to sit and listen to, right? Even a rabbi. Yeah? He says, so these guys come in, and he says, Vayar osam, and he sees them, and the pasuk records, Vihine zoafim, and they were downcast. Rashi says, atzuvim, the ponim atzuvim, they had depressed faces themselves. They had long faces. Oh. So, if he came to get cheered up, okay guys, I'll see you later. I don't need needy people. Okay? I came to get cheered up. If you're going to come in and tell me something from the outside, but if you've got sad face yourself, there's nothing I can do. Yeah? But he gets up in the morning to go seek out other people. He sees that they have long faces. And listen, V'yishal eserise paro. He asked these people over here that were with him in the prison, Madua, 4 words, Madua penechem roim hayom. Why are you guys down today? Why are your faces bad today? And then they answered him, and they told him over the dreams. If Yosef, and then later on I saw in the Sefer this idea that I had discovered over here, that if Yosef had never asked him, Lama, why are your faces? V'yishal l'sarise paro. He says, Madua penechem roim hayom. Why are your faces down today? Then they never would have told him the dream. The opportunity never would have come, and who knows, history would have been different. But Yosef was a person, he was a positive personality, and even when he was in prison, he was never in prison, right? Because he was rejected from his family, and then he was trumped up on charges, and he went into jail. We didn't even describe how low, and he's away from his family and rotting away. And it wasn't a prison like you have all the rights and all the foods and everything like you get in the New York State prison. Even it was something much worse. It was a pit in the pit of the worst place. And yet he got up and he says, "Let me fill this opportunity wherever I happen to be, even if I'm in the lowest place, even if I'm in the worst place. Let me see what I can do to cheer somebody else up and to help somebody else." And because of that seeking of chesed, to do something for somebody else, he got out of prison, because even when he was in prison, only his feet were in prison. He was never an imprisoned personality, right? That's something about Yosef. A person who's a leader has to be a positive person, has to be positive. Sometimes we're sitting at the dinner table, one of my kids, they throw the spoon down and go, ugh, right? You ever had that? And I said, kids, they said, Ima, this stinks. I said, be positive. And they said, yeah, I'm positive it stinks. Yeah. But you have to, you have to learn how to say things in a nice way and interpret things in a nice way. I mean, one of my Rebbeim who I admire, probably one of the most in the whole universe, he's as a father, as a leader, he's one of the most positive people. I remember one Shabbos morning in yeshiva, where we were reading from a Sefer Torah, and the Sefer Torah was found to be puzzle. It was the only Sefer Torah we had. We wrapped it up, put the bindle around the outside, and we parked it in the Aron Kodesh. And we migrated, the whole shul migrated, now the whole yeshiva went to a Hasidic minyan that was starting later, and we were able to come in just at the time of Kriyas Torah, and we caught up, and we were able to hear the Kriyas Torah. But we're without a Sefer Torah. Monday morning, I was a yeshiva bacher. I was sleeping a little bit late, snoring a little bit past the beginning of davening. And, I have one of these anxiety dreams that I'm missing davening. And in the middle of davening, there it is. I'm holding up a Sefer Torah like this, and the Sefer Torah is falling right in front of me. And I'm sitting up in my dream, as the Sefer Torah is falling forward, and I sit up, and I go, and I realize, Baruch Hashem, I'm awake, I'm late, but no Sefer Torah fell. I make a beeline to the shul. I had my spot right in the corner over there, in the small corner with a small linear sitter, and I was doing my thing. Monday morning, they call up, they take out the Torah, they call up Kohen Levi Yisrael, and right after that, I get a tap on my shoulder, and I look up, and it's the Gabbai, and he's going to me like this, which means I'm being called on to lift the Sefer Torah. Suddenly I get a memory of the dream that probably would have faded had not this incident happened. I start walking trepidatiously to the Amud, to the Bima, to approach the Sefer Torah. And since they had a replacement Sefer Torah, one of the Gabayim says to me, he says, watch out, he says, this one is a heavy one. And the other Gabay Sheni says to me, he says, I think the handle is loose. I said, time out. I walked over to my Rosh Yeshiva, who was standing right there, and I said to him, Rebbe, I'm not lifting the Sefer Torah. He says, why not? I said, I had a dream just this morning that a Sefer Torah fell. He says, that's a very good dream. I said, it is? Okay, fine. I did the whole thing. They wrapped it up and they put it away. No problem. NP. Right? And afterwards, I went over to the Rebbe. I wanted to ask him a question. He says, I got to do carpool. He said, if you want, you can come along with me. He's going to shepherd all his children to school. So I get into the minivan. We drive off. It's pouring rain. We get in front of his house. He honks the horn a couple of times. The door of the house opens up and the kids come out, trying to get between the raindrops, but there's no space between the raindrops. And as he's waving them into the car, he's saying, rain is good, rain is good, rain is good, rain is good. And I remember we parked in front of the school, the door opens up to the van, and he sends him out. He says, rain is good, rain is good. He wants to dispel any, because you're getting all wet at the beginning of the day. Rain is good, rain is good, rain is good. And they go into the school. I'll never forget this. And then the door closes, and I'm driving with him in the pouring rain. And I said, Rebbe, is it really, I wanted to ask you, is it really a good dream to see a Sefer Torah fall? And he says, like this, he says, the Gemara in Bracha says, Hakol holach achar hapisron. When it comes to dreams, everything goes according to the interpretation. You give it a good spin. He says, and it's a good, that's what it is. That's what it is. If you put a positive spin into it, and you make it into something good, it's good. And that made it good. We don't sit and say, oh, this is a bad omen. It's a good sign. He says, a Sefer Torah falling, it's a good dream. That's how it is. Kachaya. And it worked out all right. And rain is good. It's a nuisance, but it's good. And I saw that positiveness, that's what he put into everything. As a matter of fact, Gemara says, I remember going to Reb Mordechai Schwab, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, many years ago. My wife, we got flooded out of an apartment. There was different things that were going on, whatever. Came back to him, and he pointed out, Reish Lamed Shulchan Aruch, Reish Lamed in the Shulchan Aruch. A bunch of times that I went there, he was a real tzaddik. Reish Lamed Shulchan Aruch, Reish Lamed in Shulchan Aruch. It says, Rugel Adam Lomer, a person is obligated to say, should custom himself to say, Kol Mad Avid Rahman Latav Abda, everything Hashem does, he does for the good. Kol Mad Avid Rahmana Latav Abda, everything Hashem does, he does for the good. It quotes a statement from the Talmud that says, Rugel Adam Lomer, that a person should accustom himself. You're right, to say. Now it's interesting. It doesn't say over there the person has to believe it. Rugel Adam Lomer, a person should accustom himself to say it. And you don't say it for somebody else, by the way. I wanted to make a cartoon when I was a student, because sometimes people say, Gamzul Tova. You don't say it for somebody else. I want to make a picture of, I got one of the Rebbeim's tie. If you pull on the narrow end of the tie and you push this up, it gets tighter, and his face is turning pink and purple and saying, Gamzul Tova. Oh, the shit didn't work out. I didn't go. The job failed. Gamzul Tova. Your car got hit. Gamzul Tova. But he told me at that time, Reb Mordechai Schwab, I never forget. He says, there's a haftacha. And I only feel bad. I never asked him. I asked his son, who I'm very close with, Rabbi Yehuda, I asked him. But he couldn't find the source. He said, his father said, there's a haftacha, that if a person says it, even at the time you're not really believing it, he says that he will live to see the good that's going to come out of it. You will live to see the good that's going to come out of that thing. When the hurricane came last, and it put a huge tree on top of my car. It was a tree maybe about as long as this room over here. Thick, like these two stenders put together. Crushed my car. But it just missed my house by this much. Where we were sitting with the kids. And I was sitting in the room, I heard this thing slice like a knife. And it was sitting on top of the car. And I was just in the car an hour before I went to go pick up my daughter. And I was going to go out to the car and said, listen, the lights are out. Let's find out what's going on. I'll go listen to the news in the car. Rahman al-Islam. I said, Kol ma da'avad Rahman al-Tavav, Baruch Hashem. Now, because I saved 15 minutes and a phone call to Geico, I'm driving a much nicer car than I was driving before. Baruch Hashem. Gamzul Tova. Right? As a matter of fact, we use it as a pitgam hashvul. We take a statement every week and repeat it 100 times for the students in the school, all the students in every class. So one of the rabbis says, I have a nice niggun for that, Gamzul Tova. Oh, you mean like Uncle Moshe's Gamzul Tova, Gamzul Tova? No. Not that one. He says, Gamzul Tova, Tova, Gamzul Tova, Gamzul Tova, Tova, Gamzul Tova, Gamzul Tova, Tova, Gamzul Tova. And then it goes, this too is for the good. This too is for the good. And when we said it over, learned it over with the students, So I told over the whole story of Yosef going down into Mitzrayim, that he's going out to see what's doing with his brothers, and they confront him and they strip him of his coat and they start to mug him. Gamzu, what's he saying to himself? Gamzu latova tova, gamzu latova, gamzu latova tova, gamzu. This too is for the good. And now they're pulling him out of the pit. Oh, it's turning out good. No, they're selling him down to Egypt. He ends up in Egypt. And then, he finds himself a good job down there and he's working. Gamzu latova tova. Next thing you know, he's trumped up on charges of being sent into prison. Gamzu latova tova gamzu. This too is for the good. That's what he's saying to himself. And then now he's being pulled out of jail. And when he's being pulled out of jail to meet Paro, he finds out that there's 7 years of famine coming up. Oh yeah, gamzu latova tova gamzu latova. Right? And then turns out that he ends up, because he understood the dream, he was able to save food and save the world and save his family and further the plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it turned out okay. Maybe that's the source of it. Gamzu latova tova gamzu. So even though he didn't see the good at that moment over there, but he lived to see the good that was coming out eventually in the end.
Somebody says gamzu tova when something happens.
Right.
They really believe it. They're not waiting for something to happen.
What's that?
Somebody who says gamzu tova and they really believe that. They're not waiting for. They think that whatever that situation is, that's really for the good.
That situation, yeah.
That in itself is good.
Right. So the situation, but sometimes it's very hard to see. That's why I think the careful language of the Shulchan Aruch is rugel adam lomer. The person should accustom themselves to saying it. You know, it can't. It's not a chovos levavos. It's not a duty of the heart as much as it is a duty of the mouth to say it and to state the position, to put that good spin on it. I don't see how Sefer Torah falling is a good dream. But if I put that positive spin on it, then I will live to see the good. It's a seed of something that's going to come out. That thing may not be experienced as good. A person does make a Baruch Dayan Emes. We do make such a bracha like that, right? But the Gemara says that we're obligated to make a bracha on the Ra, on the Tov, just the same way on the Ra, just the way we make it on the bad. So there is an aspect. It's not so easy to figure out what the difference is between Gamzla Tova and Rugel Adam Lomer. But if somebody says Rugel Adam Lomer, if somebody says Kol Ma David Rachaman Latav Avdi, even if they don't see it at that time, they'll see that the good that's going to come out of it. Things do work out sometimes. That thing that we thought that we missed out on turned out that it was good that we missed that opportunity. If you live long enough, you realize that's usually the way to work. Baruch Shepatroni Me'oin Sheshelaz. That job didn't work out. That shidduch didn't work out. That situation.
The other half of my life is a saying. There are two sayings that are appropriate. One is, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And the other one is, don't tell God how big your problems are, tell your problems
how big God is. Okay, so Gamzul Tov, if it's coming from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so there's a grand philosophical approach to it. But from our little suffering corner over here.
So, as far as Pirkei Avos and leadership, the quote that immediately came to my mind was "B'makam she'ein ish."
Right, in the place ve'ein anoshim mishtadel liyos ish. Right. Okay, there's to fill up that place. Beautiful, very nice. Sure.
The thing about the 70 years of famine, I mean, the whole thing in Mitzrayim was that they were cut off from Hashem like the Nachash. They never had a daven. They always had the meals always overflowed. So were those 7 years of famine like a unique thing that happened in order to accommodate the whole story of Yosef and Am Yisrael?
100%. Why not? That was all part of the Kol Poel Hashem L'Menehu.
Was that something that happened only this one time? And for this particular?
There had been other famines in history. There have been other famines in history. But this famine happened to dovetail and further the plan that Yosef.
The idea of it being, can I finish asking my question? Yeah, but the concept of being in Egypt where they always had the meals to rely on, that was my question. And it's sure throughout history the main family.
Right, but now Klal Yisrael comes in, it's a different mazel. Now it's a different, once Yosef comes down there, once Klal Yisrael is involved, so now they're subject to the combined mazel with Klal Yisrael.
Wasn't the real point, not Yosef, not reuniting Yosef and his brothers, was the real point, Kor Bazel, before Matan Torah.
100%. But we had to get down there. That's it. They had to come down there. Right.
And they came down with bonds of love rather than bonds of love.
Right. And then the next generation had to go through the same thing. Every generation had to go through that same rediscovery process over here. That which brings us, we fast forward to really the next more current examples of leadership. We find Moshe Rabbeinu, right? And one of the first defining moments, unbelievable so, that we find about Moshe Rabbeinu. Yosef was one type of leader. Moshe, okay, also not different, but we find different defining moments. An amazing thing we find about Moshe Rabbeinu, where it says the following thing, that this is the most elegant, most unbelievable art. I don't even call it a art. It's just an insight. That probably the initial defining moment we find for Moshe Rabbeinu as a leader, right? Since that's our subject, it says, "V'hi b'yami mahem v'yigdal Moshe." Moshe grew up after a period of time. We know that he was fished out of the Nile, right? We know that he was his mother nursed him, but only at the request of Basia or Bisia Bas Paro, because he refused to nurse from a Gentile woman. And so as a result, Moshe Rabbeinu was raised on his mother's knee, his holy mother's knee. And the Gemara says he had not less than 10 beautiful Jewish names: Avigdor, Kuziel, Tuvia. He had, I don't have the whole list in front of me. He had 10 wonderful Jewish names. But then again, he grew up in the lap, this prince of Egypt. He grew up surrounded and being educated in the ways of Egyptian life. He was being groomed for leadership within the court of Pharaoh. So you can imagine, that must have been, who knows how low and how decrepit and how degraded that culture is. That was anti-Mi Hashem Asher Eshmes Kolo, that they should produce a leader at that time who says, "Who's Hashem?" Then I should listen to his voice. So he's a man of two worlds, Moshe, with an internal culture conf. And it says, "V'hi b'yami mehem v'yigdal Moshe." Moshe grew up. V'yetze alecha v'yar. He went out to his brothers. V'yar v'sivlosam, and he saw their suffering. He wanted to see it. He heard that Klal Yisrael was suffering, that there was a plan, and yet part of him was curious to see. And once he saw, there's a difference when you hear about it in the news and everything, when you go and you see the actual suffering there, and it touched him. It set him off. V'yar ish mitzri. This is what he saw. He saw an ish mitzri. Maki ish ivri mechav. He saw an ish mitzri that was hitting a Jewish man from his brothers. And the pasuk continues, "V'yifein kol v'cho." He looked this way and that way. Right? This is how we're going to read it, like this simply. Looks this way, that way. Anybody watching? Am I being observed? Although Rashi gives another understanding over there. V'yar, and he saw ki einish. There's no person. So what does he do? V'yaches a mitzri. He hits the mitzri. V'yatmanehu b'chol, and he hides him. He buries him in the sand. He committed a murder, right, in order to protect his Jewish brothers. So it set him into action. Beautiful, amazing thing. So I saw an idea like this from the Shomer Amuni. And he says that whatever's happening on the outside world is a manifestation of what's happening on the inside world. Right? Whatever Moshe Rabbeinu is confronting outside of himself, the life as a self-portrait, is really what's happening on the inside. Right? So he said he grew up on his mother's lap, holy mother Yocheved, who was a daughter of Levi, Bas Levi. You can imagine one of the Shivim Nefesh that came down to Mitzrayim, and yet at the same time he was wrapped in an envelope of Ra, of negativity. And so which is he? Is he this? Is he that? Is he that? Is he this? And therefore he goes out into the world and he confronts and he sees Vayar Ish Mitzri. He sees there's an Ish Mitzri, right? That's Makkah, that's hitting, right? Ish Ivri Me'achav, hitting the Ish Ivri from Me'achav. This is the defining moment over here. Beating up the Jew from his brother. Me'achav means ad gishto ad echav, until he got to that point, that was at that internal point, his most closest point, that was beating up on the Jew within himself, right? And what happened? V'yifen kol v'cho, he looks this way and that way. He says, what am I going to be? Am I going to be an Ish Mitzri? Or am I going to be an Ish Ivri? What's going to be with Moshe Rabbeinu? Ki ein ish, and Vayar, and he saw ki ein ish, that he's not going to be a person. I'm not going to be that Ish Moshe. Anav Mikol Adam. I'm not going to be that Ish Elokim. I'm not going to be the Ish. Ein ish. There's not going to become an Ish out here. An Ish is a higher spiritual designation. Like I said, Anoshim, it says in that Mishnah. But Mokam ein Anoshim, his title is Ish. Be a man. He's not going to be that Ish. Not going to be that person. And therefore, what did he do? So he said, I can't, if I'm going to be this, I'm going to be a little bit this, a little bit nishtahen, nishtaher. What do you get when you cross a chicken with a rabbit? Nishtahen, nishtaher. Not going to be this, and not going to be that. And what happened? Vayachesh and Mitzri, therefore he smacks and he smites the Mitzri. And listen to this. V'yat manehu, and he buries him. Could have said he just buried him. Could have said he just hit him and he killed him and he ran. V'yat manehu b'chol. Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol. This is secular. This is a hood ornament. This is this is my shoes. This is not me. This is secular, and this is Hamavdil Ben Kodesh Chol, and this is me. This is who I am. I am Moshe. I'm Moses. I'm Moshe. It's an amazing thing. Very, very beautiful idea. Moshe Rabbeinu, that was the defining moment. Now comes up something very interesting. The next pasuk tells us something even more telling. The next 3 words. I think it's 3 words. Yeah. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a difference between one of the 3 distinguishing characteristics of a Jew is a Jew is a Baishan, a Rachaman, a Chesed. And leadership also. A Baishan person has to have certain standards. They're not going to do shameless acts. A Rachaman means have mercy. Now what's mercy? There is a selfish dimension to mercy. That is that if I'm going into a restaurant on a freezing cold night with a friend of mine, we're walking in and I see some guy sitting on a heating grate and he's all bundled up with a thin blanket around him, and I'm going to go eat a 2.5-inch steak with a bowl of soup, and I say, oh my God, so I reach in my pocket, I give him $5, or I even take my coat off and I give it to him. How can I go in and enjoy a steak and a hot bowl of soup and a potato with smart balance on it? Well, this guy and a glass of wine. Well, this guy's out here suffering and starving and freezing. So for my own self, so I can enjoy myself, I have to do something for him. That's an aspect of Rahmanis. But Gomel Chesed is something different. And it says over here that after Moshe Rabbeinu had that wicked confrontation that one day where he reacted to seeing somebody beating up on a Jew, then the next part of the pasuk says, V'yetze b'yom hasheni, 3 words. And he went out on the 2nd day. Because one thing is, I'm going to the restaurant and I see this guy say, listen, here's $50, go get yourself something else here. I'm going to bring something out for you because I have to satisfy my guilt, my own pain in seeing you suffering. What's that?
Never give them money.
My empathy, right? We know, but food, but my empathic instinct is to do something for someone. But now comes, I'm going to go out and look. Now let's go start to look for people. Who can we help? Who can we feed? Who can we take care of? Who can we make warm? Oh, Moshe Rabbeinu goes out on the 2nd day and he's looking for more trouble. Not trouble. He's looking to see who else can help. And therefore he defined himself on the 2nd day as a Baal Chesed. I'll share with you just 2 last ideas over here. Beautiful, beautiful ideas that I remember one time, a number of years ago, I went to a dinner. Not a dinner, like in a restaurant. I went to it was a yeshiva dinner. It was a big moised, a big institution. It was a huge institution. I don't even remember what the name of the moised was. And for some mystical reasons, I'm very rarely invited to dinners. I don't know why. But I had a friend of mine who had gotten an extra ticket. There was everybody in the community was going to this particular event. And my friend Baruch, he says, come, Rabbi Label, you come with me, you'll be my guest. I said, okay, fine. So I sat with him at the table. And, it was a chance to see who's who. I remember Rav Palm was there. I held Rav Palm's jacket after Marav. And I spoke to him for a few minutes. And they had every beard there. Everybody was a who's who, a dais, like a chasana cake over there. You had like layers and layers of, of people sitting at different heights in the dais with, the biggest people in all of Klal Yisrael, the Moetzes Gedolei Torah. And up to speak, you don't usually remember these speeches at the dinners, It's usually, you're looking at your watch and wondering, when do they come out? When's the intermezzo? When's the soup already? When is it finished? Maybe, So now all of a sudden, Rabbi Wine. Anybody heard of Rabbi Wine? Rabbi Barrel Wine. He was living in our community at the time. He stands up to speak. I remember with his Chicago drawl and his sardonic sense of humor. And he says, why was I asked to speak over here? Why did I come? He says, I've got my own yeshiva, I've got my own institution, He says, but I find myself these days, he says, I'm a rabbi that just can't say no. I'll never forget this. Because it was a life-changing moment. I didn't expect it to happen. It usually doesn't happen at a dinner like that. And he says, what lit inside of me? He says, usually when they ask me to come to speak, he says, I have a busy schedule. I don't know if I can fit it in. Or if they ask me now if I can take one more fella into the yeshiva, I used to say, listen, the class is full now. I said, maybe we can squeeze one more guy onto the bench. He says, so what happened? He says, I heard, he said that there was a Jew who survived the horrors of the Holocaust. And he moved to California and he lost his only son during the war, his son Ukuziel. That was his son's name. And he says, and he became fabulously wealthy, and he spent $2.5 million in order to build an annex to the Yad Vashem Museum in Eretz Yisrael. He says, in order to honor his own son and also the 1.5 million children. Of the 6 million Jews that perished during the Second World War, 1.5 million were little innocent children. And he wanted to build a monument. He says, so when I was in Eretz Israel one summer, he says, last summer, I wanted to see what did the man spend $2.5 million on in a museum. And I went, and I've been there subsequently myself. And he says, expecting to see that there's going to be spectacles or little shoes or little, artifacts that indicate there was a child here, a drawing, a poem, something, a picture. None of the kind. It wasn't anything like that. He says, we came out of this bright Israel sun. I came into this dark corridor, into this darkening room. And in the background, they're playing this lugubrious music that's droning away. And you come in deeper into the room, suddenly you're confronted in this dark room by a light, a candle, 2 lights, 3 candles, and it's reflected by mirrors until you feel like you're in a room with 1.5 million lights, surrounded by stars of lights. He says, and this music is droning in the background, wang, wang, this amorphous music, and they're reciting in 7 and 5 and 6 languages the names, of little children and their towns. Chaim Schwartz, age 8, Krakow. This one, age 9, Hani Goldberg, age 9, from this city. He says, and it's French, and it's English, and it's Hebrew, and it's washing over your ears. And he says, at one moment, I felt claustrophobic. I had an anxiety attack, and I ran out of the room. He says, when I ran out of the room, he says, I found myself standing out in the hot Israel sun with the sweat coming down from my forehead and wondering to myself, what was it that triggered inside of me that anxiety attack? He says, I'm a big boy. I've read hundreds of books on the Holocaust. I've written articles about it. I sleep at night sometimes. I close the book and go to sleep, without losing a blink of sleep from reading a book. And now all of a sudden I had this incredible anxiety attack and I had to go running out of the room. He says, well, what was that about? He says, so I started replaying the thoughts in my mind, like, what was it in my head? What was the thought that triggered me, that pushed me, and that set me off? And he says, when I hit the thought, when I figured out what it was, when I played over the tape, he says, it answered a question that had been burning inside of me for 40 years, a question in Chumash. He says, and the question in Chumash was the following question. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu called Moshe by HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he was by the sneh? By the bush, and Hashem was appealing to him, go do something, go help the Jewish people. Why was he calling him Moshe at that time? We said before, Moshe had 10 beautiful Jewish names. When someone gets called up to the Torah, I have one son, he has 3 names, Meir, Simcha, Zisel, Ben Lev, and everybody, it's about some people have 3, 4, 5 names, but the Gabbai calls them up by their Hebrew names. He doesn't call them up Phil, Ben Bill, Tom, Ben Harry. It doesn't happen like that. I'm sorry. He got a Jewish name. It's Herschel. It's this. Called him by his Jewish name. Hashem alone with Moshe Rabbeinu called him by his Egyptian name. Why did he call him by his Egyptian name? It's a good question. Yeah. Later on, I said not the first one to ask the question, but listen to the answer that he gives. He says, when I was in that room, he says, and they were playing over those names, it was washing on my ears. He says, at one moment, he says, I thought I almost heard my own name. He says, I was also 8 years old when that was going on. He says, but instead of being on a transport, going out into an open field someplace to be shot and left for dead in a pit, or going to up in smoke, with my family, being separated from my family and being left for kindling someplace. He says, the shkacha had it that my family managed to escape and they came to the United States. We ended up in Chicago and I ended up in yeshiva. He says, sitting in the grandstands, munching matzahs at the White Sox, whatever it was, in Wrigley Field. He says, and I realized that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking to Moshe, he wasn't just calling him by his name, he was making an appeal for him to go save the Jewish people, go do something for the Jewish people, and therefore he called him Moshe, Moshe. He says, and Moshe has a meaning. It wasn't just a name, Moshe, like we said, Tom or Harry or Bill. He says, what is the meaning, Moshe? Because you were pulled out of the water. And he said, at a time when Jewish children are being sent into the water, when they're drowning and they're going downstream, you were a firebrand and you were saved from the water. He says, Moshe, Moshe. He says, go save something, go do something for the Jewish people. He says, that was the appeal that he made to him. He says, if you were saved, if you found out something about, life, about Judaism, if you made it to this point over here, he says, then you have an obligation to go back and do something for the Jewish people. You weren't saved for nothing. And Rabbi Wein said, he says, when I realized that there for the grace of God goeth I, he says, I said to myself, barrel. I remember sitting next to my friend holding on to him. I said, Label, let's go do something for the Jewish people. Let's make a difference over here. That if we made it to this point, if we found out about Shabbos, if we found out about Torah, if we found out about Shiurim, we found out about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a world when Jewish people in the world is going downstream, and we found out about something, then we have an obligation to hear our own voice echoing inside of ourselves, to go do something, to go make a difference. But it's not so easy to make a difference. We'll finish up with one last idea over here. I saw just the most unbelievable thing just a couple of weeks ago in the Parsha. That Moshe Rabbeinu went to go do something for the Jewish people. People get excited. I'm going to go speak to people. I'm going to go talk to my cousins and my, good luck. And sometimes you find out it gets worse before it gets better, and that's what happened with the Moshe Rabbeinu. He went to speak to Paro, and he was told, go speak to Bnei Israel, get them excited, and go speak to Paro. And he did both of those things, and he got repelled. Life became harder for Bnei Israel. And then he comes back, and Hashem says, go back to the Bnei Israel. And then he tells them, and they wouldn't listen to him because Mikotze Ruach, because they were just too oppressed now. Their life became much more difficult for them. And Hashem says, no, now even go to Paro. And Moshe comes back and he answers with what Rashi says in one of the 10 Kal V'chomers in Chumash. And it says, V'yedaber Moshe lifnei Hashem lemor, hein b'nei Yisrael lo shamo olai. He says, the Bnei Jewish people are not listening to me. Pardon me. And he says, V'eich yishme'eni Paro. How is Paro going to listen to me? It's good logic, right? If the Jewish people are not listening to me, and they're maminim or b'nei maminim, then how's Paro going to listen to me? Now you want me to go to Paro after Klal Yisrael couldn't listen to me? What do you want? Paro's the one who said, Mi Hashem Esh Me'es Kolo. And then Moshe Rabbeinu drops a very important piece of information at the end of the verse over here, at the end of the pasuk. He says, "Va'ani aral sasayim," and he says, "And I can't speak. I'm not a speaker. I'm a kvad peh." And the Sfas Emes points out of here, what are you talking about? First of all, what do you need that extra information? It's like I go to my car and the car's locked and the car's locked and I haven't got the key, and plus there's no gas. I mean, so if I can't open the car, so what does it matter? There's no gas. What do you say? I'm kvad peh and aral svasayim. What are you bringing it up for? They're not listening to you anyway. So what does it matter if you can't speak? What are you coming up with an additional excuse that's not necessary? And plus, it's old business. Hashem already said, I took care of that business beforehand, right? When he came by the burning bush, he refused for a week. He says, I can't speak. I can't. Who gives a person a mouth? And plus, you got a brother Aaron, and Aaron's going to take care of business. Aaron is going to be your spokesman. Everything's going to turn out all right. So even if you can't speak, Aaron will be the spokesman. It'll give him an important role to play, and that satisfy all of your problems. So we already took care of that problem. So why is he saying this? And Ani Aral Sfasayim. You hear the question. It's a very good question the Sfas Emes asks. Listen to this answer. This is an atomic bomb. Sfas Emes says, there's an old Zen notion. That's not what the Sfas Emes says. When the student is ready, this is the source of it. The teacher appears. And Moshe Rabbeinu says like this. He says, the reason that I'm Aral Sfasayim is because they won't listen to me. How many times you go to speak to somebody and you want to tell them something, and you see that they're impatient, or they're looking at their watch, or they're looking away from you, and you realize that there's not that opening, that teachable moment to go in and your wife says, go and ask him for a raise, and you're going, hi, I've been working for you the last 6 years, and I haven't had a, and you knock the door and you see he's not. I just want to say hello. How you doing? I said, do you want a cup of coffee? I'm going out for coffee. Not going to bring and you come home. Do you ask him? Do you ask him? Yeah, I spoke to him. I knocked on his door, but he just he can't find the words. You want to tell, husband wants to tell the wife something, wife wants to tell the husband something, you want to tell your child something, you can't tell, you want to tell your friend something, but you can't tell them because they're not open for it. So you're a Ral Sfasayim because they won't listen. Isn't that unbelievable? That's unbelievable. Al Tomer Davar Shev Shol Lishmoa. You want to teach the world, you want to do something, you have a desire for it, but you can't do it. But you got to wait, and you got to develop your voice, and you got to rehearse your ideas, and you got to write them down, you got to think about it, and you have to stalk the moment. You have to wait for what we call the teachable moment. And the Sfas Emes says, and Haraya, the biggest proof of this point over here is, listen to this, is that when it came, this week's parsha, now we're up to date. It says that Klal Yisrael traveled, and after having left Mitzrayim, it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, singular lashon. What does Rashi say over there? K'ish echad b'lev echad, like one person with one heart. When everybody was ready to listen at that moment over there, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo b'atzmo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself splits the sky And he's been waiting 2,448 years to that point in order to share some important information. Just like Yosef was waiting to say, Ani Yosef ha'od avichai, Hashem comes forth and says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Kodesh Baruch Hu begins to pour wisdom out of the sky and begins to spell out and tell everybody everything that they've been waiting to hear for all these thousands of years, because the students weren't ready until that point. But once the students are ready, then Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to open up. And therefore, the leader is looking for that moment and has to wait and has to stalk that moment in order to not thrust his opinion, but to find that opening and to wait for that moment where now you can assert something. Now you can say what needs to be said. Moshe Rabbeinu had been rehearsing. Kodesh Baruch Hu had been rehearsing all those many, many years for this right moment, just to wait for that right moment. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes hours, sometimes it takes centuries, sometimes it takes millennium in order for that right time to come. So this is an aspect of leadership, is to wait and to be patient and to stalk that moment and wait for that teachable moment over here. Because we see that that's what Moshe Rabbeinu had to do. And that's what he was saying over here when he says, Ani aral svasayim. I can't say it sometimes. Actually, there's two different approaches on that Maimer Chazal. There's a number of different approaches. Al tomer davar she'efshar l'shmoa. Don't say something that can't be heard. Shouldn't say things that people are not ready to hear. I'm cognizant of this all the time. When you speak to different people, they're just not ready to hear it. Shesofer l'shemei, in the end they're going to hear it. But then again, Rev. Samson Raphael Hirsch says, Al Tomer, don't say davar she'efshar l'shmo. That's impossible for the person to hear it. Shesofer l'shemei, because if you say it, in the end, the person's going to understand. They're going to say, like Rabbi Yosef Salanter said, it was worth for him to go travel all over the world. He traveled all over the world. He didn't have a Camry, and he went all over Europe, and he gave lectures, he gave talks. He says that it was worthwhile. There's a few different answers. He says, number one, he says, even if people would say, something, even if it improved one person's mincha, he says, even if that one person was myself, that was one approach that I heard once. And another approach, he says, and even if the person said in the last moments of their life, he says, that man with the old white beard? He was right. Al tavar davar, don't say something she'efshar l'shmo, that it's impossible that it should be heard. Shesofer l'shemei, in the end, the person's going to understand it and the person's going to get it. Right? These are opportunities for Jewish leadership that are available, even people not holding positions of rabbinate or positions, just being that optimism and having a clarity of vision and saying kol ma david rachmanu l'tavav, waiting to see the good, or seeing the good even in the actual situation itself, however we want to understand it, waiting for those right moments to come, right? And also defining ourselves, having clarity on ourselves, not to be split into two, but to be focused like a laser beam, not to be, each Mitzri and each Ivri, to be a little bit this, a little bit that. That sort of splits our vision, to be leaders of ourselves, and then, Bez Hashem, we could be Bali Chasadim and leaders of other people. Okay, I have to leave room for